first episode of my React slash Next.js tutorial. What I want to show you guys today is the most basic and simple example of how to dynamically pull information onto a web page, specifically using the .map uh, array function. So taking a look first at kind of how it works under the table here is you give it in an array. So for example, this is the array that you're giving it. You're telling it to map, to essentially map x, which is the array, and each iteration of that array, and you want x times 3. So this is kind of what you're telling it to do. This is the original function, not necessarily for web development, but just for JavaScript coding and programming in itself. So for example, tell it to multiply by 3. Obviously, you look down here. 1 times 3 is 3. 4 times 3 is 12. 9 times 3 is 27. And then you can essentially do anything on here. You can even add 2. It'll iterate through every single piece of the array and essentially run whatever functionality you want on it. But that is not for web development. So what I want to draw your attention to over here is how it works using JSX. So before we really get going here, you must understand and essentially look up the documentation on essentially what useState is, and then also this dynamic coding here. So basically you're telling it to, once data is set as a useState variable, then you want to display this div here. But if you're not clear on that or caught up to date, then go read up on the documentation and then come back. So what you want to do is give it data at the structure of what I have built. So not even going down into the .map function yet. Essentially, I have a button here where on click, I want to call this function, my fetch data function. So what I'm doing here is pressing the button, calling it, and this will be in the next tutorial, essentially waiting to call an API to get essentially a response and getting that JSON data and then setting the result to that. But that is out of scope of what this current tutorial is going to be teaching you. So we can just go ahead and comment that out and comment out or uncomment the map test data 1 function. So I'm importing that. Standard practice, what I normally do is I would never have like this await fetch in my homepage function. I would import a function like what I have here, example data files, and then mapintro.js, where currently I have set up just some test data, which I'm returning once this function is called. This is where I would also have an await fetch API call. And the reason why I separate out my fetch calls from the main is because normally you have to authenticate yourself into a database to fetch the data. And I normally find that it's a lot easier to do that and a lot cleaner if you have different functions outside of your page. So this is the data that we currently have coming in. Very simple. It's essentially JSON structure. You're giving it an ID, a name, and a price. Very simple. The most important thing for the map function is you need to give it as an array. It's very simple. So coming back here, fetch data, setting the result to map test data 1, or whatever is returned from that, which is, we know, this array. And then what we're doing is setting our data state to the result of what data is coming back. So once this data is set, we're essentially telling this right here to now display and map the data. So as you can see, the key is the item. So what the actual data.map here is doing is we're giving it obviously data. We're telling it to map each item. So if you remember from the beginning here, it is going through each item in this array, and you can name it whatever you want. You could name this X, kind of exactly what it is here. I'm just calling it item. So each item in the array will have, as you already know here, a name, a price, and an ID. So coming back here, all you need to do is tell it item.name, item.price, and then you can display it as whatever tags you want. It's really, really simple how to use it, but I would always recommend making your key an item.name or item.id, something unique, in case you want to run other functions on that unique item itself. For example, calling specific data from a separate database once that API data is pulled in, or running some more advanced like data analysis on that item specifically. Or if you don't want to do that, you could just give it just an item. So let's get this up and running and show you what is going on. So here, very simple. So as you can see, fetch, as I do this, it is going to call that function, give us our item.name, which is product A, and then that unique item's price. So you can also run like, let's see, a flex call on this, or even just a flex. So class name, we can just even flex that. That doesn't look the best, but you know what I mean. You can separate these out however you want, have it displayed uniquely. But this is essentially a really quick tutorial on understanding what the map does and how to dynamically display data that you want to pull onto a page. And you can set up like many of these, where if you want, like as soon as data is called or like on a timer or something like that, you can have another data function beneath it. Like I can even just copy and paste this div where you can essentially asynchronously run the data. So you can call this one, and if I came up here and made a set data 2, and then fetch data 2, and then set data 2, and come down here 2, and then data 2. So you can have basically as many of these as you want. So for example, now this, once some action happens, then that data would display. And then for example, another action happens, then this data would display. So you can really set up as many of these as you need in any sort of format and pull dynamically different pieces of information onto your page based on different things that can happen. So that's a really quick tutorial. Again, thank you for watching. And in the next one, I'm going to essentially show you, instead of having a static here, I'm going to be calling from an API and showing you how to use this with essentially JSON data coming back in. This video helped you out. I would greatly appreciate any feedback, and thanks for watching.